Every single day, your heart beats around 100,000 times. It's pumping nearly 2,000 gallons of blood. Honestly, it is an absolutely incredible biological engine. But today, we're diving into the fascinating and kind of terrifying mechanics of what happens when our body's ultimate engine starts to break down. Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to look at the sheer mechanical brilliance of the cardiovascular system and, well, the tragic irony of how the human body actually tries to fix itself when that system fails. Before we get too deep into the weeds of cardiovascular pathophysiology, let's just quickly breeze through our roadmap. We're starting with the heart's vital mission, moving into systolic versus diastolic failure, looking at the body's rescue attempt, diving into the Frank-Starling law, and finally, wrapping up with the decompensation spiral. All right, Section 1, the heart's vital mission. Let's get a quick baseline for what a healthy heart is actually supposed to do. So, as you probably know, we're powered by a beautifully efficient dual pump system. The right side is taking in deoxygenated blood from the body and shipping it off to the lungs. Meanwhile, the left side, its job is taking that freshly oxygenated blood and distributing it under extremely high pressure to everything else. It literally has to work in perfect unison. And that brings us to the cardiac cycle itself. We've got the active contraction phase, systole, and the absolutely crucial filling phase, which is diastole. During diastole, the heart muscle is relaxing and letting those chambers fill up with blood. Then, during systole, bam, it forcefully squeezes that blood out. Both of these phases have to be utterly flawless for the engine to run. Now, the key point here is that to meet our body's constantly shifting metabolic demands, the heart relies on one exact equation. Cardiac output equals your heart rate multiplied by your stroke volume. Stroke volume is simply the amount of blood ejected with each single beat. Under normal resting conditions, your heart fills with about 130 milliliters of blood and ejects about 70 of it. That 70 milliliters? That is your stroke volume. Section 2, systolic versus diastolic failure. So what actually happens when this perfectly balanced mechanical pump breaks down? Look, it's really important to understand that heart failure isn't just a sudden heart attack. It's this ongoing, chronic inability of the heart to keep up with what your tissues need. And this is primarily due to a massive drop in that stroke volume we just talked about. The pump just isn't moving enough fluid. What's fascinating here is the stark physical contrast between the two main types of failure. A heart that can't squeeze, that's systolic failure. Think of a tired, worn-out engine. The muscle walls become weak, thin, and floppy. The chamber just dilates out like an old balloon that's completely lost its elasticity. On the flip side, diastolic failure is a heart that is literally too thick to fill. The muscle walls get incredibly stiff and hypertrophied, leaving barely any room for blood to even enter during the resting phase. But in both of these scenarios, your stroke volume completely plummets. Okay, moving to Section 3, the body's rescue attempt. This is all about triage and the compensation phase, because when stroke volume drops, the body panics. Seriously, the body treats a drop in cardiac output as an absolute 5-alarm emergency. To keep you alive, it triggers 3 major physiological rescue attempts. It fires up the sympathetic nervous system, it adds more fluid to the system to crank up the pressure, and it literally starts growing more heart muscle. Let's look at this at the cellular level. The sympathetic nervous system just goes into complete overdrive. It's releasing neurotransmitters like epinephrine, pure adrenaline, which targets the beta-1 receptors right on your heart muscle. This creates a positive chronotropic effect, meaning your heart rate spikes, and a positive intratropic effect, meaning a much harder, more aggressive contraction. The body is essentially flooring the gas pedal to force this failing engine to perform. Section 4, the Frank-Starling law, the power and peril of preload. You see, the body is also altering the blood volume itself. It releases hormones like ADH and aldosterone to retain fluid, bumping up the volume of blood returning to the heart. And this concept is directly tied to the famous Frank-Starling mechanism. Think about this quote: if we stretch a rubber band out a little bit, it's going to snap back. Stretch it out even more, it's going to snap back even more forcefully. Just like stretching that rubber band, increasing the preload volume physically stretches those ventricular muscle fibers. And according to the Frank-Starling law, that extra stretch forces a much stronger systolic contraction. For a short time, this actually beautifully compensates for the failing pump. Which brings us to Section 5, the decompensation spiral, a tragedy of good intentions. Because these quick fixes, they work at first, but they are setting the stage for a massive physiological downfall. I want you to really think about this question, because this right here is the exact turning point where compensation turns deadly. What happens to an old rubber band when you keep stretching it past its physical limits, day after day? Well, overstretching the ventricles with extra fluid and forcing the heart to beat faster and harder with all that adrenaline drastically increases the cardiac workload. The heart muscle's demand for oxygen just skyrockets. But remember, we're dealing with a failing cardiovascular system here, so the coronary arteries simply cannot deliver enough oxygenated blood to this overgrown, overworked muscle. Because of this massive supply and demand mismatch, the myocardial cells literally begin to suffocate and die off. And as they die, the heart becomes even weaker and the failure gets progressively worse. Adding insults to injury is a process called downregulation. Because your body is continuously flooding the heart with adrenaline to force it to pump, the heart's beta-1 receptors actually get overwhelmed. To protect themselves, these receptors downregulate. They literally decrease in number. So the heart physically stops responding to the body's emergency signals. The gas pedal just stops working entirely. As the pump fully decompensates, the entire system backs up. Since the left ventricle can't push blood forward, pressure in the left atrium rises. This high pressure transmits backward into the pulmonary capillaries. The hydrostatic pressure gets so incredibly high that fluid is literally forced out of the blood vessels and into the lungs, causing pulmonary edema. The patient begins to experience severe dyspnea. They're essentially suffocating in their own fluid, gasping for air even while sitting perfectly still. And if stroke volume drops far enough, blood pressure plummets, sending the patient into fatal cardiogenic shock. We're left with this fascinating yet totally tragic irony. The body's desperate, well-intentioned attempts to restore cardiac output, retaining fluid, growing thicker muscle, flooding the system with adrenaline, those actually become the very mechanisms that permanently destroy the remaining healthy heart cells. And this leaves us with a really profound clinical challenge, and the provocative thought I want to leave you with. If our own biological reflexes are virtually guaranteed to destroy a failing heart, how do we as humans intervene to artificially block those reflexes and save the pump before that decompensation spiral becomes fatal? Thanks for taking this incredible physiological journey with me today. I hope this explainer gave you a perfectly clear picture of the true mechanics of heart failure.